They got me saying over
Huh? Right, exactly.
Okay, take your slides out and turn to chapter 3. Encumbrances. Chapter 3 moves one step past ownership. We've already talked about ownership. We've talked about different forms of ownership. We've talked about how multiple people can own property together. Now we want to talk about restrictions on that ownership, limitations on that ownership, limitations on what you can do with the property, what you can use the property for, and not just limitations that might be placed there by the grantor. We talked about that some in the ownership chapter, last chapter, but limitations that are there because of laws, or limitations that are there because of zoning rules or covenants if you live in a neighborhood that has restrictive covenants, or because you borrowed money and somebody's placed a lien against the property. All of those things are called encumbrances. That word is a fancy word. An encumbrance is an anchor, something that slows you down, something that limits your use of a property is called an encumbrance. And so it's any limitation of use that we can talk about. Now we're going to talk about several different kinds. These are the different types of encumbrances that we're going to talk about in the chapter. The first of which is something called a lien. A lien is the right to foreclose when we talk about it in the real estate sense. If we're talking about a lien when it comes to real estate, it is the right to foreclose on the property. You all will not want to focus on it that way because we don't like to think about foreclosure. It's an ugly outcome. Folks, it is the only outcome when a lien is attached to the property. The whole reason we attach liens to property is that we intend to do what with the property? Foreclose. Because that's our only protection to get our money back from this person. That is the whole purpose. When you borrow money against your property and they place a lien against the property, what they're simply doing is placing a placeholder and saying, and they're telling the world, I have the right to do what to this property if this person does not pay me? Foreclose on it. We call that a specific lien. A specific lien is one that is attached to a specific piece of real estate. A specific lien attaches to a specific piece of property. One piece of property. Not every property that you own, just that one. You could also have what we call personal liens or judgments. Those are called general liens. We do not focus on them in this class because they don't have anything to do with real estate. So if you've ever had someone say they have a judgment against them, that's a lien against them as a person. A lien against them as a person. Could it affect real estate that they own? Yes, because it affects everything that they own. So which of these is worse? A personal lien or a specific lien? A general lien or a specific lien? Which one do you think is worse? A general lien, because it impacts everything about you. We don't focus on that in this class. We care about specific liens. Specific liens attached to specific pieces of property, which means they only affect that specific piece of property. If you own 5 pieces of real estate and you stop making the mortgage payment on one of them, are they going to foreclose on all 5, or are they going to or are they going to foreclose on the one? The one. Even if they foreclose on that one and they can't get all their money back and you still owe them money on the other ones, they can't just go and foreclose on those because that lien only attached to the what? The one property. That's what we mean when we say a specific lien. So when we talk about liens, again, it is just the right to foreclose. Most of the liens that we talk about with regard to financing, I finally brought up the finance word, the F word, right? Finance. When we talk about financing, most of those liens are what we call voluntary liens. Voluntary simply means the owner of the property agreed to the lien. How does an owner of real estate agree to a mortgage lien? By doing what? By signing and borrowing the money. There are also lots of examples of involuntary liens. My property taxes are very much an involuntary lien. Does Wake County need my permission to place a property tax lien against my property in Cary? No. They do it every year. They do it every year. And remember, it sounds ugly to say, but why do they place a lien against my property? Because they intend to do what? They intend to foreclose on it if I do not pay them. That is the whole purpose. See, you don't wait and apply the lien when you're ready to foreclose, because then you're probably too late. The lien is a placeholder. The lien is putting your place in line. Imagine if you walk in a restaurant and they've got an hour-long wait. Do you just walk out and come back in an hour and hope that you can be sat, or do you put your name in line? You put your name in line. That's the way liens work too. You file a lien at the beginning in case you have to foreclose later on, because you need to establish your place in line. Is that making sense for you guys so far? Okay, good. So when we talk about voluntary liens like mortgages, we're going to focus on those much more later in the class. But I do want to give you the OREE words as it relates to mortgages, because most of you will get them wrong. We say the OR person is the person doing the what? The giver, the giving person. Who's giving the mortgage? I hear all kinds of different answers, right? The owner, the borrower. Because the mortgage is not the money. It's not the loan. The mortgage is the promise to repay. Who's giving the promise to repay? The borrower is. So who is the mortgage or? The borrower, which would make the bank the what? Mortgagee. The borrower is the mortgage or. The bank or lender would be the mortgagee. Because the borrower is giving the promise, the bank is receiving that promise. Does that make sense to you guys? So the mortgage is not the money, it's the promise of repayment. It's actually the promise of collateral. They don't really care that you promise to repay. They care that you promise to give them collateral. Again, you promise that they can do what if you don't pay them? Foreclose. You have to give them that right. That's called a mortgage. Giving them the right to foreclose is mortgaging your property. Those are voluntary liens. We're going to talk a lot more about them when we get to finance chapters, chapter 14 and 15. The rest of this chapter, when we focus on liens, we're going to focus on the involuntary ones. The ones that get put there by somebody else, somebody other than the owner of the property. So this mostly is people you have not what? Paid. These are people whom you owe money to, the owner, I shouldn't say you, who the owner of the property owes money to and has not yet paid. So the first example is something called a mechanics lien. Sometimes you will see them referred to as materialman's liens. You ought to write that in your notes. Mechanics liens, materialman's liens. Means the same thing. These are people who provide either work or materials that is used on your property. So give me an example of people who would provide work and or materials that are used on your real property. I hear plumber, roof, carpenter, landscapers, HVAC systems. How about a lumber company if they bring a load of lumber and dump it off in the front yard? If you haven't paid for it already, is that providing material?
Yeah.
Is it be used on your property? I'm sorry.
How about the cable guy?
The cable guy, the cable person, generally is not providing you material. they are providing it on behalf of the cable company, for example. Now, it depends on what they were doing, I suppose. It could cross the line, but generally speaking, they're not going to have the right to a mechanics lien. But almost anybody who you, as the owner of the property, personally hire to come do work on your property has the right to file a mechanics lien. Do you have a question for me?
You said mechanics lien is also on
A materialman's lien. Material man. Yes, sorry, Mike.
So, just so that I understand experience, so cable guy, that's a service that can be requested by a tenant, not necessarily the owner of the property.
Correct.
That would be more or less a general lien on.
It would deal with the tenant, the person,
Right.
not the property. That's exactly right. And so generally speaking, tenants, well, not generally speaking, tenants never have the right to request any kind of a service that could end up in a lien against the property. So, for example, a tenant could hire a carpenter to come out and do work, but the carpenter would not have the right to place a lien against the property because the work had been done at the request of the tenant, not the owner.
Well, the contract should require the
Owner's signature,
Owner's,
absolutely.
yeah.
How many of you have ever had like a roof put on your house or windows put in, or even just had a quote from those people? Like they come to your front door. What's the first question they ask you when they come to your front door and they want to give you a quote on windows? Do you own it? They're not just curious. They want to know, are they talking to the person who, if they sign this contract, gives us the authority to place a lien against this property if they don't pay us? That's why they're asking that question. Yes,
Or
ma'am.
like the people at Home Depot want to sell you like the HVAC systems or whatever, you just tell them you rent,
They'll leave you alone, right? There you go. There's a solution. You learn solutions like that all the time. You'll get called, once you get a real estate license, you'll get calls non-stop. You think you get calls from telemarketers now. Wait till you get a real estate license, because there's somebody out there trying to sell leads, sell this, sell advertising on this website all the time. And so you know what I tell them? Like, I don't sell real estate, I'm just an instructor. Oh, we'll take you off our list. Thank you. It's a lie, but it works. It works. So same idea, yeah. Because once you tell them you rent, they don't have the right to file a lien against the property, which means they're not going to take on the job because they don't have any protection that guarantees they'll get what? Paid. Does that make sense for everybody? They're not going to put the hard sell on somebody like that. Whereas if they've got the owner of the property talking to them, even if they don't get paid, they're going to have a lien. And that's what we're talking about here. So note now, don't talk yourself out of the idea. Was landscaper listed in that list that we just said? Y'all said landscaper and I agree, right? So on a test, if you saw something like, Tom hired a landscaper who planted 2 rose bushes in the front yard and never paid him the $120. Could the landscaper legally foreclose on his home? What is the answer to that question? Yes, absolutely, because the landscaper is a mechanic or materialman. They have done work on the property. They did it at the request of the owner of the property, and they were not paid for it. Can they place a lien against the property? Yes, and the lien is the right to do what? To foreclose. Now, would they probably foreclose? No. But could they? That's what the question's asked. And see, sometimes you talk yourself out of what you know. Because you're like, oh, that's stupid. Nobody would do that. That's why they ask it that way. Because they're testing, do you know that any lien could result in foreclosure? Because any specific lien can always result in foreclosure. That's the whole reason you file a lien in the first place. You don't bother to go down to the county courthouse, because that's where you have to file a lien. You have to physically go to the county courthouse, number one. Number two, you have to pay an attorney to actually draft the document that becomes the lien. Number three, you've got to pay the courthouse to record the lien. We're talking a $400 or $500 process just to record a lien. If you do that, you intend to follow through. Does that make sense for everybody? That means if you don't get paid, what are you intending to do? Foreclose on the property. That's the result of these liens. So, now that hopefully you understand what a mechanics lien is, let's talk about some of the rules that go along with mechanics liens. There are 2 dates that matter to a contractor. I'm going to just use contractors for right now. When they're doing work on any real property, it doesn't have to be a home. Could it be this building? Could you have a mechanics lien against this building? Absolutely. You have mechanics and contractors come work on this building. Absolutely they can file a mechanic's lien. They care about 2 dates. They care about the date they start work, and they care about the date they what? They finish. The date they start and the date they finish. And those dates are going to be really important when it comes to mechanics liens. So it says here that mechanics liens must be filed within 120 days of last furnishing labor or materials. That's a fancy way of saying you have 120 days after you what? Finish your job. Whatever job you're doing for that property owner, you have 120 days to finish. After you finish, excuse me, not 120 days finish. 120 days after you finish the job to file a lien. If you don't do it within 120 days, do they still owe you the money? Yes, but you lose the right to do what? To file a lien against their property, which means you lose the right to foreclose on their property, which means you lose a lot of your ammunition to collect money from them. Because realistically, the threat of filing a lien is just there so that hopefully you can do what? Collect. You're going to send them a letter that says, if you don't pay me, I'm going to go file a lien against your property, in hopes that they will pay you so that you don't have to file a lien. Does that make sense? Nobody wants to file these liens. It is an expensive and ugly process. Everybody with me so far? So how long after I finish do I have to decide if I want to file a lien against the property? 120 days. Yes, ma'am, Martina.
Is there any gray area as far as if the job is finished or not? Say the work comes up and you're out you're not discussing it all, or
Well, so Martina said, is there a gray area from, when, if you're not going to finish the job? What does the rule actually say? From 120 days from what? Last furnishing. So for example, if they're supposed to pay you in drafts, like say you did, you've done half the job, they're supposed to pay you for half the work, and then you come back and finish, and they haven't paid you for the first half, so you're not going to finish the job. When would your 120-day clock start to tick? The last day you actually worked on the property. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? So it's the time you stop working. Doesn't have to be complete. From when you finished working, you're done working on the property. Is everybody good with that? It's a good question. Now, down here it says we must bring an action to enforce within 180 days after we have finished the job. An action to enforce is a very fancy way of saying foreclose. You must foreclose within 180 days after you finished working for this person. So how long do you actually have to file the lien? 120 days. If you wait the whole 120 days to file a lien, you file a lien on day 120, how much longer do you have before you have to move forward with foreclosure? 60 days. The clock's running at the same time. It's not 120 plus 180. Does everybody understand me on that? So if you wait the full 120 days, you only have 60 more days to actually foreclose on the property. Is everybody good with that? So let's talk about what happens if you don't foreclose. If you don't foreclose, you still have the lien. The lien is still attached to the property. You just lose the right to actually do what? Foreclose. Here's the value in that. We'll use a word, a big word. Liens are appurtenant, which means liens last forever, which means liens stay with the property, correct?
Yeah.
So fast forward, even if I lose the right to foreclose, what is this person going to do at some point in the future? Sell. And the next owner has a choice. They either have to buy this property and leave the liens attached, or they have to tell the seller to do what? Pay the liens. What do you think the next buyer is going to do? Make them pay. So, is there value in the lien even if you don't foreclose? Yes, because eventually it's going to get paid. Eventually it will get paid when the property is sold. Yes, sir, Bernard.
Say, for instance, in like if a parent was dying and left with the property for kids, they have to pay the lien before the title is transferred over?
You never have to pay. So Bernard's question is, parents dying, they transfer property over to the kids, yada, yada, yada. None of that matters because of the word appurtenant. What's the lien attached to? The property. So we transfer title, guess where the lien stays? with the property. So it doesn't matter if we transfer title 26 times, the lien is still attached to the property. So therefore, who's going to have to deal with the lien?
Somebody else.
Whoever owns the property.
So you don't necessarily have to pay it, per se.
You only have to pay it if the next owner
Allowed.
is not willing to take it on. And so in other words, anytime you sell it, no owner in their right mind is going to buy a property. No buyer. Think about yourself as a buyer. And you go and you're buying this property, and your attorney, your closing attorney who works for you says, now you should know that there's a mechanics lien on this property for $6,000 for an HVAC system that was installed 15 years ago. Do you want to buy the property and leave the lien attached to it so that you might be foreclosed on, or do you want me to force the seller to pay it off before they transfer title to you? What do you think the answer to that question is going to be? You'd be like, hell no, pay that thing off. I'm not buying this property. Does that make sense? And so that's what I mean. Nobody's going to force you to pay it off. You can transfer title 100 times, but eventually somebody's going to want to sell it, and it's going to be the buyer who's going to say, no, I'm not buying it unless you pay that lien off. That's where the rubber's going to meet the road. Yes, sir. Yeah. Mike.
Unsatisfied lien is usually somebody's inability to pay.
Correct, or unwillingness to.
Unwillingness, well, okay, because let's say it's an inability, and they go to sell the property, they don't necessarily have the money to satisfy the lien, the buyer's insisting that they,
Pay it off.
satisfy it. So you could, at that point, what's probably going to happen is you're going to make an adjustment on the sale price of the property.
It's actually easier than that. So John's question is how the mechanics of this work. Okay? How the mechanics of telling the seller to pay off the lien if they don't have the money works. They're going to have the money. Where's the money coming from? The sales price. So we're not going to deduct it from the sales price. We're going to deduct it from the money before we give them the sales price. Who do you think is going to hold all the money? The closing attorney. And who does the closing attorney work for? The buyer. So you're giving your attorney who represents you, here's my money to buy the house. Don't you dare give them 1 penny until every lien is satisfied. So we're not actually going to rely on the seller to satisfy the lien. Who's going to satisfy the lien? The closing attorney is going to cut a check and send it and pay it off. And then they're going to give the seller what's left. It's the same way with a mortgage. Sellers would never have the cash to satisfy that lien at a closing, would they? I mean, how many sellers do you know have $248,952 sitting in the bank that they could write a check to pay their house off before they go to closing? They need the proceeds from the sale. So what happens is the money gets all paid into the closing attorney. The closing attorney uses the money to first pay the liens, and then whatever is left over gets dispersed to the seller. Does that make sense? That's the way it would happen in a sales
So
transaction.
how do you know when you buy a house that it's not in the lien?
How do you know? So Maggie's question is, how do I know when I buy a house there are not any liens? I've said this several times, but we haven't talked about it. I said, you go and you record these liens. Where do you record a lien? At the county courthouse where the property is located. So whatever county the property is located in, you physically go to the county courthouse and you record. Here's what record means. You pay the county a fee to scan that document and make it a publicly available record so that the whole world can see it. So answer your own question now. How do you know if a property's got a lien on it? What are you going to do? You're going to go to the courthouse and you're going to look. Because if it does have a lien, it's going to be publicly available at the county courthouse. Does that make sense for everybody? Let me get Isaiah, then I'll come that way. Okay?
They fix the house up right before selling it and then don't pay.
Hold on to that thought. That's a wonderful question, okay? I'm getting there, but just hold that one for a second. I don't want to shut you down, but I want to make sure we get there. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to ask, is there a way to now, the owner, to see the liens online?
Yes, everything is available in most counties. The question was, can I see the liens online? Yes. In Wake County, everything is available digitally. They don't want you to go to the county courthouse. They don't want you to go down there.
The auctioneer comes down and sits in the middle of the lobby, and all of the liens they have to say it out loud, woman or man.
It's all available digitally. You can search it. Yes, ma'am, Zenia, and I'll get you mine.
So since liens are pertinent, and so say you have a lien on the property and the closing attorney reaches out to that, to pay off.
That creditor.
That creditor, but that creditor no longer is available. So would that?
Problem.
That-
A big problem.
So what happens in the transfer of that property?
Doesn't.
It doesn't?
What happens is it doesn't. Everybody hear her question? She said, what if we find a lien on the property and we go to reach out to that creditor and we can't get in touch with them? They're defunct. They're out of business. There's nobody to pay. What happens with the sale? And the answer is, it doesn't happen. Because the new buyer is not going to be willing, because the lien is pertinent. The lien stays attached until it's what? Paid. You can't find anybody to pay, so you can't pay it. So the lien doesn't, and the lien doesn't just magically go away because the person that, or company that the money is owed to has gone away. The lien stays attached. And so the new buyer's like, well, I'm not buying it till you get that off. And the seller's like, well, I don't know how to get it off. So what happens in a situation like that? Doesn't sell.
How does the seller rectify it?
Through a lot of legal action. Kathy's question was, how does the seller rectify it? It's called a suit to quiet the title. You have to file a lawsuit. And you have to essentially sue the old creditor to get the lien removed from the property. Remember, the courts are not going to look favorably upon this person. Nobody's going to pity this poor seller. Because why is the lien there in the first place? They didn't pay somebody. Nobody's going to look at you and go, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. They're like, well, you should have paid in the first damn place. That's literally the approach everybody's going to take to this. But from the buyer's perspective, the buyer's going to simply say no. Now, that does not mean these don't happen intentionally, but the practical answer to your question is, it's not going to close. Unless the buyer's willing to overlook it. Of course, the buyer could always say, well, I'll buy it anyway. But most likely they're not going to. Most likely they won't even have the ability, because if they're borrowing money, their lender's going to say, no way, we're not allowing you to do that. Yes, ma'am. Sir Mike, and then I'll come back over here.
So if you were to go look up the property's lien history online, we wouldn't have to, I mean, there's no way we would have a specific book and chapter number.
You don't need it.
It is structured in a way that you can look per address.
Every property has a PIN number.
Okay.
So some counties you can search by address. In every county you can search by something called a PIN number. PIN stands for Property Identification Number. And so you can always search for any unsatisfied or uncanceled liens that were outstanding against any property by its PIN number. Let me get Holly's and I'll come back to you. Yes, ma'am.
What if the house is already foreclosed and they have mechanics liens against it?
What if the house is already foreclosed and it has liens against it? What kind of liens?
Like mechanics liens.
We'll talk about that. Hold that question. Okay? Hold it. I'm coming to it. All right? I'll put that one behind Isaiah's. We'll get there. It's a good question. Real good. But let me get there. Okay? Yes, ma'am, Rainey.
Do you have a lien and not know it?
Yes. Rainey's question is, can I have a lien and not know it? Yes. People don't pay attention. People don't pay
So how
attention.
do you notify something comes from what county?
Something would come from the courthouse saying you have a lien against your property, but if you don't open the mail, or you don't see your mail, you may not know. You may not know.
So the person probably would, like, try to notify the person.
Yes, I am quite sure you're going to have had several communications from this vendor who did work on your property. Remember, this is not some company in Kalamazoo, Michigan that you just ordered stuff from. This is somebody who has been to your house several times and worked on it. They're probably going to come looking for you to collect their money. So I would imagine you would be pretty aware of their intent to file a lien. Yes, it would come certified mail. And actually, it would come more than certified. When it comes, it would come in the hands of a deputy sheriff. You would be served that. Now, it doesn't require personal service. They would just take it to the front door. But a sheriff would visit your property and serve those papers. Yes. Yeah.
The brand new houses, they're not gonna happen.
That is, Maggie's statement was brand new houses never have liens. That is a very untrue statement. Because there is no differentiation between new, old, resale, whatever, new construction. If a vendor has provided work or materials to that property and they have not been paid, they have the right to do what? File a lien on the property. And so when you have subcontractors working on that property, if they have not been paid, do they have a right to file a lien?
Are the builders responsible for that?
Yes, it's absolutely the builder's responsibility, as long as they what? As long as they own the property. They sell it to you, what are the liens attached to? The property. You better check. Annalyn said the right thing. You better check. See, folks, we're going to introduce you to this idea called buyer beware. North Carolina is a buyer beware state. That means nobody's going to hold your hand and say, precious, let me take care of you. When you buy property, it is your job to know exactly what you are getting into. Now, most of us are not capable of handling that alone. There happen to be licensed professionals who are experts in making sure that you don't commit these kind of mistakes. Maybe I should direct you toward a real estate class sometime. That's why you hire a broker to represent. Let me ask you this question. Would you all feel comfortable with me representing you in the purchase of a property, that your interests were going to be protected?
Absolutely.
Yes. Because I do this every day. I have done this thousands of times. I know what the warning signs are to look for. I know where the pitfalls are. That doesn't mean I'm perfect, but it means you have a much higher likelihood of not having this problem if I'm on your side than not. And that's the whole purpose of having professionals who are licensed and teaching you this stuff. Yes, to get you past an exam, but it's because this has real world implications. Okay? Yes, sir, Mike, and then I'll move on.
Yeah, I'll show you.
No, you're fine.
So I assume that disclosure is not mandatory because you said there are circumstances where the owner doesn't even know that there's a lien on the property. So it is either the buyer or their appointed
Persons, right.
responsibility to dig up the situation.
That would be very correct. It is all the buyer's responsibility. And whether the buyer chooses to take that on by themselves or to share that responsibility with one or multiple professionals, and in most cases they do share it with a couple of different professionals. Number one would be a real estate broker. Number two would be a closing attorney. Those would be the two people, the two entities that you would want to hire that would give you the highest protection because you brought people in who know how to look for these things.
Do you see a lot of attempts to kind of hide these? Is there a lot of that practice where, sellers try to
Hold that question flows behind Isaiah's and Holly's. And I'm getting there. I'm building it up to it. Yep. Okay? So now, we talked about 2 time periods here. We said you had how long after you finish work to file the lien if you're the material man? 120 days. And you have how long to actually foreclose on the property? 180 days. Okay? Now, if you don't foreclose, do you just lose everything if you don't foreclose within the 180? No. You still have the lien, and the lien's going to stay attached to the property until it's paid off. Is everybody good on that? So at some point, it's going to get satisfied. Now, to demonstrate this next thing, I need like 3 of you to volunteer. I promise it's easy. I'm not going to put you on the spot. You're not going to answer any questions. I really just need bodies. Can I get 3? Come on, London. Come on, Brittany. Who else? I need 1 more. Her brother. His name is Channing. Don't you read it? All right. So I have Channing, London, Brittany. Okay? They are all service providers. They are all material men. They're mechanics. And I own a house. Actually, I'm building a house. How about that? I'm building a house. Now, Channing owns a concrete company. Is everybody good with that? Channing owns a concrete company. And so he has been contracted to come in and do all of the concrete work in the property. Give me some examples of concrete work that are going to happen on the property. Driveway and sidewalk. Foundation. So is Channing working on pretty much day 1? Yeah, foundation's going to be of concrete, so he's working on day 1, pouring footers. He's coming back at the very end to do sidewalks and driveways. Does that make sense? Now, London owns an HVAC company. And so she's been contracted, of course, to install heating and air in the property. So that's going to happen fairly close to the end. And Brittany owns a plumbing company, which is pretty much in the middle of the process where all the plumbing's going to be done. Does that make sense? Now, here's our little timeline. I'm going to just give you some sheets of paper so we can kind of remember, it'll help us remember here. Let's say, I'm going to say that we started building this property on February 1. So that means that Channing started work on February 1. Is everybody good with that? So that's when he began working on the property. And actually, we'll get that back. We finished building this house on June 15th. So since he was pouring the footers and he was pouring the driveway, he started on the first day and he ended on the what? On the last. So his work went from February 1 through June 15th. Is everybody good with me so far? All right. Now, and that's for the concrete. For the HVAC, London's company came in. They didn't even start their work until April 15th. And they finished on April 25th. That's pretty reasonable for HVAC work, wouldn't you say? 10 days? Okay? So there's her time frame. And then we have Brittany. What did I say? You're a plumber, right? So we got plumbing. And so Brittany's work was over a longer period of time because in the plumbing going to start kind of when you get the house framed. You got to run the basic plumbing, but then what's the plumber got to come back and do after sheetrock and flooring and all that's in? They got to put in all the fixtures, right? The faucets, the sinks, the toilets, all the fixtures have to go in. So her company started work on February 15th. We'll say February 20th. Is when her company started work because they had to do the drainage and the septic and all that kind of stuff. And they didn't actually finish until May 15th. So she's got a pretty long period of time too. Is everybody good on that? So we got 3 contractors here, and I gave you their start date and I gave you their end date. Now, I'm a nice guy, so I don't pay any of them. My kind of contractor, right? I don't pay any of them at all. So looking at those time frames, I'm going to start getting bills from all of them. Who has to file their lien first? Whose 120-day time period ends first? Is it Channing, London, or Brittany? London, because she finished her job first. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So she files her lien first. She's the first one to the county courthouse because it gets to be May, June, say it's July 15th. Is she getting close, or say it's end of July. Is she getting close to her 120 days? Right, because it'd be May, June, July would be 90 days, right? So when she gets to the end of July, she's like, they're not going to pay me. So she goes and files her lien at the end of July. So I'm going to put one more date on hers, the lien date. She files her lien on July 31. Everybody good with that? Yeah. So now she's a lien on the property. Who has to file their lien next? Brittany. Now keep in mind they can all file their liens, right? They don't have to wait till the 120 days. But who's most likely to file their lien next? Because generally you're not going to file this lien until you have to. You're going to try to collect the money as long as you possibly can until you get up against that 100. So who's likely to file their lien next? Brittany is. So she gets to be June, July, August. So say she gets to like August 30th and she files her lien. Is everybody good with that? So she becomes a lien on August 30th. Now finally, Channing realizes he's not going to get paid. He has the longest amount of time because he did what last? He finished last. Even though he started first, he has the longest amount of time because he finished last. So he has until July, August, September. He actually has until October the 15th to file this lien. Does that make sense for everybody? So he waits till the very last day. We'll just say he does October 14th. Is he still within his 120 days? Yes. So do they all have valid liens on the property?
Yes.
Now, generally speaking, how do we put people in line? Whoever shows up first, right? Who showed up first here as far as their liens go? London. No, she didn't. Because even though she filed her lien first, who showed up at the property first? Channing. And it's important to be first, folks, because remember, a lien is a right to do what? Is it possible we could run out of money before we satisfy all the liens? If you're worried that the buffet's going to run out of food, do you want to be at the front of the line or the back of the line? You want to be at the front of the line. Who's going to be first in line to get paid even though he filed his lien last? Channing is. Because of what? He did what? He started first. So now you look at these two. This lien was filed first. When did you start work? When did you start work? That's the order that they're going to get paid in when the property is actually foreclosed on or sold later on down the road. When we start paying out the money, we're going to pay Channing first, and then we're going to pay Brittany, and then last, assuming there's still enough money left over, we're going to pay London. Does that make sense for everybody? So they're going to get paid in the order that they what? Because they started work. Is everybody good with that? That's all I got. Thank you. Thank you. I told you what you were at, right? It helps, I think, to have a visual to associate with that. Yes, Mike. That's Isaiah's question. I'm getting ready to get there. Hold on, I'm coming. And I love that that question's clicking. Just hold it, okay? Yes, sir, Mike.
Okay, so, new construction, we got several people showing up at the same time. So say the start date is the same for multiple liens, would it then default to the...
Whoever recorded first and started on the same day.
Literally like kind of day recorded?
I mean,
If they were on the same day.
but even if they started on the same day, they're not going to have recorded at the same time as well. So then the tiebreaker would be recorded first.
Recorded it first, not
Yeah.
the value of
Right.
the amount.
Nope.
Okay.
The amount has nothing to do with it.
So if the start date is the same, then it defaults to who
Recorded first.
Who applied for the lien.
Mhm.
Got it.
Right. Yes, sir, I think. They are. Isaiah's question was, if you run out of money at a foreclosure sale, the person who doesn't get paid, are they just out of luck? And the general answer is yes. Now, later on in the class, we're going to talk about something called a deficiency judgment. A deficiency means you don't have enough what? Money. So what they can do is they can go sue the property owner who did not pay them for what's called a deficiency judgment. And what kind of lien do you think that would become? Would it be a specific lien or a general lien? That would be a general lien. You would try to attach that lien to them personally at that point in time. But again, you'd have to spend the money to file the lawsuit. You'd have to, I mean, it's very hard to go down that road. Yes, ma'am.
But then if the lien doesn't get paid, is it still concrete?
It is not. That's a wonderful question, because what prompted us to pay? Jim's question was, if the lien doesn't get paid, isn't it still with the property? And I said, no. What prompted that payoff? What did I say happened? Foreclosure. The first thing a foreclosure does is wipes away the liens.
So it doesn't matter who forecloses, all the liens.
It does. That's exactly right.
So only in the case that the foreclosure amount could not satisfy the total amount
Of all liens.
would a lien stiff.
That's exactly right.
And then they can sue.
That's exactly. And then they can get a deficiency judgment from that. Now, I want to revisit Isaiah's question and Holly's follow-up and Rainey's. I told you I was coming back to it. Isaiah asked this question earlier. He said, what if we sell the property and there's no liens against it? You can tell me if I'm going to the right place here. What if we sell the property and I do the research and there's no liens, but I just had the thing fixed up?
You wait 120 days.
You add.
Let's just say I just had it fixed up. You go in and you show your client that house. We like showing stuff that's just been renovated, flipped, right? New HVAC, new roof, new carpet, new paint, renovated kitchen. How long do those service providers have to file a lien against the property? Remember, they're not filing it against the owner, they're filing against the property. How long do they have? 120 days. Could a sale happen somewhere in the middle of that time period? Do they still have the right to file a lien against that property? You better believe they do. So here's the practical application of that. It's not enough just to look for the liens that exist. What kinds of questions do you have to ask?
Is there any?
Has that been paid for? Where are the receipts? I heard somebody say receipt. So when I go in and I show a house, it's wonderful if it's got a new roof. Receipt. Yes, the new HVAC system is nice. Receipt. I want to see the receipt. I want to see it marked paid, and I'm not even going to trust that. Am I going to contact the HVAC company and make sure there's no balance outstanding on that thing before I even allow my client to make an offer on the property? Absolutely. Because there is the potential for that lien to come into existence after the sale. And that goes to Maggie's question earlier, because she asked, well, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if I just bought new construction? I wouldn't have to worry about that. This is exactly what you have to worry about with new construction. Because what if that builder doesn't pay the subcontractors? You end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars of mechanics liens against that property, and it has happened. When St. Lawrence Homes went out of business in 2009, there were 42 homes that they had closed on and not paid the subcontractors. And within weeks after they closed on their new homes, some of them got notices of mechanics liens in excess of $300,000 and $400,000 on their property, because they had bought the property and paid St. Lawrence Homes, but St. Lawrence Homes never paid the subcontractors.
That's a surprise to them that they're realtors.
Somebody didn't do their job in protecting their interests. That's exactly right. That's your name right here.
How often do we have like your clients that actually?
So Martina's question is a great one. What's the ultimate protection against this? Wait 120 days. From the time I see the property to the time we actually close, if we wait 120 days, haven't we eliminated the ability for any liens to be attached? So ideally, if I view the property today and I make an offer on it, when would my ideal closing date be if I have any question about mechanics liens? 120 days from today. And make sure we go back, we look, is the property the same then as it is now? Then we know there's no possibility of mechanics liens. Even if something hasn't been paid for, they don't have the right to do what? To file the lien, which is all I care about as a buyer. Now, that's not practical in a lot of cases. A lot of sellers aren't willing to wait 120 days, and that's where you fall back to asking for receipts, getting receipts. And the, people say, well, I get them to sign a statement saying they paid for it. I don't trust them. I don't trust them. I want proof that it's been paid for as much as we possibly can.
I've already watched it, but you actually have people wait 120 days. Is there a problem, or?
But few and far between. Few and far between that actually wait the time. Yes, ma'am, Randy.
That's a lot of people not doing their job. Is that because they just trust them?
That's exactly right. Because you never learn to distrust somebody until they burn you, right? And so the accepted norm had always been that builders paid their subcontractors, and because if they didn't pay them, they couldn't continue to stay in business, right? Well, what broke down about that process? They weren't continuing to what? Stay in business. And so it had become very common in the business for the builder to pay the subcontractor in some cases months after the fact. Because the subcontractors aren't working on one house at a time. They're going out and they're working on 5, 10 houses, and so they might only once every 3 months cut a check to their framer. Well, how many houses does that framer work on in that 3-month period? And if they don't get paid for any of them, they have the right to file a lien against every single one of them. So, yeah, so we changed. The short answer to your question is, we changed how we do new construction in North Carolina as a direct result of St. Lawrence Homes. Now, it is expected in a new construction transaction that the builder will provide a list of every subcontractor who's ever put a hand on that property from the beginning of construction to the end. And prior to closing, the closing attorney will contact each and every one of them and get them to sign a waiver saying that they've either been paid or they are waiving their right to file a lien against the property if they're not paid. So you get the actual vendor to sign saying that they don't have that right. Paralegals usually do that, yeah. And that's why you have like closing attorneys that specialize in new construction, because it's a different process. Yes, sir, Mike.
And so if mechanic does work on a house and they wait longer than 120 days, and the property is sold,
Doesn't impact the property anymore.
all right, so would they still have the opportunity to attempt.
They go after the-
general lien on the
The person, that's right, but it's no longer a real estate question. Right. Yep, just becomes a debt question at that point. Everybody good? Yes, ma'am, like,
See more common when you're selling your home and your buyer has asked for certain things in the punch list, and you have those things corrected.
yep,
You hand over those receipts.
yes.
So, and that's.
And so Lee's question is about like punch list items. Because a lot of times if we go under contract, the buyer might do an inspection and then ask for certain repairs to be done. Could those repairs result in a mechanic's lien? Absolutely. So Lee said, do I ask for receipts showing the repairs have been paid for? I actually go one step further. If I'm on the buyer's side and I've asked for repairs to be done, I actually specifically request that they not be paid for prior to closing. I want them paid out of the closing. I want the invoices sent to the closing attorney from the vendors and paid by the closing attorney, because that's the ultimate proof that they've been paid, when the funds actually are dispersed by the closing attorney to pay for that stuff. Does that make sense? That's, to me, the ultimate protection. Can't always do it, but it's the best way. Yes, ma'am. St. Lawrence Homes. Well, looking them up only covers ones that have already been recorded. Remember, if the work was done less than 120 days ago, they still are within that time period where they could be owed the money, but they haven't recorded the lien. And it could be recorded even after the house was sold. Yes, sir. Yes. With St. Lawrence Homes, those people all had title insurance, and their title insurance companies had to come into play and work through that. But in some cases, it took, in one particular one, it took over 5 years to get it resolved. And this person's job got transferred out of state in the middle of that, and they couldn't sell the house because they had all these clouds in the title. So it creates major problems.
If you had a lien, I'm trying to think, are any of those liens stop someone from refinancing?
Could they stop someone from refinancing? Most likely not. We're going to talk about the reason for that when we get to something called lien priority. Certain liens are more important than others, and mortgage liens are more important than mechanics liens. Mortgage liens are always going to sit ahead of mechanics liens in the line. The buffet line that we talked about, mortgage liens are always ahead of mechanics liens. So generally, you don't care about people who are behind you in line. You know, if you're at the front of the line, I don't know, you run out if you want to. It doesn't matter. You only care about the people in front of you and how much they eat, right? You took too much, you know. That's the way you do it, the back of the line, right? You know, if you're at the front of the line, you're not looking back there worried about them, you know. You're like, so liens work the same way. We good on this? Good, good. We said that, this is just a reminder, these liens attach to the property, not the person. So they stay with the property. They are pertinent to the property. This is the order. Here's our lien priority that Kathy just asked about. This is the order in which liens are paid, either at a sale or a foreclosure auction. Those are the two ways in which the property could be sold, through a regular sale or a foreclosure auction. In either case, there is a very specific order. This order is set up by the state of North Carolina. You don't get an option about this order. Now, if the state is setting up the order, who do you think they put first in line? Themselves. Look at what's top of the list. Taxes. Property taxes and special assessments. So your property tax liens sit first in line. That means no matter who's foreclosing on the property, who's going to get paid first? The property taxes and special assessments. We talked a little bit about special assessments last week. Y'all remember that discussion? We said a special assessment were like sidewalks or street lights or things that either your city, county, town, or even your HOA do to improve your property, and then they send you the what? The bill. Well, they don't actually just send you a bill, they also file a what? A lien against your property. And look where that lien goes in line, all the way where? Straight to the top. So that means when you sell your house, where are the first proceeds going to go? Property taxes and special assessments. Then we pay who? The mortgages in the order that they were recorded. Have you ever heard the expression or the naming first mortgage, second mortgage? That reference first or second simply refers to what order they're recorded in. Because the one recorded first is going to get paid what? First. So after you pay the taxes and special assessments, then we pay the mortgages in the order they're recorded. Yes, ma'am, Woody.
I got a question. Possibly because I've never owned a house before. How can you have more than one mortgage on a house?
How can you have more than one mortgage on a house? Well, you can ask your fellow Americans because we're experts at it. Remember, the mortgage is just a promise of collateral. You can promise the property as collateral to more than one person. Now, they have to recognize what their risk is in that. So, if somebody came to you and said, I want to borrow money against my house, what might you look at first to see if they already what? If they already owe someone. And then if you establish that they do already owe someone, you probably want to look at how much they owe versus the value of the what? The property. So if you see that they have a mortgage for $50,000, but the property's worth $200,000, do you feel pretty confident loaning them another $50,000 and still having enough collateral? Does that make sense? But you would be the second mortgage. The one that was already there would be the first mortgage, and it would get paid first. Does that help?
It does.
Okay. Good. Is everybody good on that? So, taxes and assessments, then mortgages, and then finally our friends who? The contractors, all the way down there at the end. So here's what you have to think about. You know, we talk about a lien being the right to foreclose. If you are London's HVAC company, and you're thinking about actually foreclosing on that property, had you better not take a moment, step back and look at what other liens are outstanding against that property. Because London's going to be doing all the work, spending all the money to foreclose. Foreclosing is not free, folks. You don't just walk down to the county courthouse and go, hey. You've got to have an attorney draft all those documents. Would your attorneys work for free? No, so you've got to pay an attorney to draft all those documents. Then you've got to go to the courthouse. You've got to pay the courthouse to record the documents. Then the foreclosure auction itself is going to cost money. Guess who has to pay for that? You do, because you foreclosed. How much money have you gotten paid, by the way, so far? Nothing. And so then you got to pay what? Any taxes and special assessments. Once you do finally sell the property, here's where the money's going. Property taxes and special assessments. Then the mortgages, plural if there's more than one. And then you better hope there's enough money to do what? To pay yourself. So that right there is the reason that very few mechanics ever actually foreclose. Because they look at it and there's a huge risk that they could foreclose and there not be enough what? Money to actually pay them anything. Could they lose more by foreclosing? Yeah, sure they could. Yes, ma'am.
So basically, with the property taxes and the special assessments, then would come the mortgages, whether it's 1, 2, and a person has, let's say, 3 mortgages.
3 mortgages.
And then it comes down, and other people have
mechanics liens ahead of you.
So there's a high possibility that a landscaper wouldn't get paid.
Correct.
So why not? Why would you even consider foreclosure instead of just, hey, I'm going to attach a lien to the property?
In that case, you wouldn't. In that case, you saw all those outstanding liens, you'd be like, no way, I'm not foreclosing. What would you do? You just sit back and what? I'd attach a lien and I'd wait.
Okay.
And I hope that at some point down the road they sell the property and there is enough money that I'm actually going to get paid. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
now, what if I'm the landscaper and I look at the property and they're current on their property taxes and they have no outstanding mortgages?
Then I'm a foreclosure.
We're foreclosing. Does that make sense? Because if they're current on their property taxes and they got no outstanding mortgages, odds are very likely it's going to be very easy for me to go in there, take that property, sell it, and get enough money to pay myself.
Yeah.
So that's how you decide whether or not to actually foreclose. And by the way, that's how lenders decide whether to foreclose. Could a lender be in the same position with a mortgage? Could they be owed more than the property would sell for at a foreclosure?
Yeah.
In fact, they almost always are. And you hear people say, well, I haven't made a house payment in 2 years, and you wonder, well, why the hell has the bank not foreclosed? Because they're looking at that and they're going, well, you're not paying me now, but to foreclose, we've got to spend $20,000 in attorney's fees, and we're still not going to get our money back because the property's worth $75,000 less than what we're owed. So they look at it as, well, I can sit here and not continue to not get paid, or we can spend $20,000 and still not get paid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I got you.
So ultimately, the decision whether to foreclose is going to be based on what the value of the property is.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the house forecloses, property forecloses, the taxes, special assessments, mortgages are paid, everything's paid. Then it goes up for sale. Like, is that what
You combine in two things. A foreclosure is a sale.
Okay, so, okay.
How do you think it was money to pay the taxes and assessments and all that? The foreclosure is the sale.
Okay, so the foreclosure is the sale. Are those are still attached?
They're not attached, they're paid.
No, but I mean, like, if you want to be the person that's buying that property.
No, when you buy that property, they're paid out of those funds.
Yes.
I bought a foreclosure, and so when I bought the foreclosure, I wasn't paying a person.
You pay a courthouse.
But I mean, all the liens gone once you buy it.
Yes, because that's what the foreclosure does. When you buy a foreclosure, you're buying it from the county courthouse. The county courthouse is dispersing the money and satisfying the liens.
My question is it beneficial for a person to buy a foreclosed house?
That is a question that cannot be answered except on a case-by-case basis. Because there's no magic answer to that question. What's always going to be the answer to does it make sense to buy any property? Am I paying a fair price for it? Am I not paying a fair price for it? Given all the things that I have to take into consideration. So you can't magic answer it and say, oh, that's a foreclosure, that's a great deal. Some foreclosures are terrible deals. Some non-distressed properties are great deals. There's no magic answer. Okay? Is everybody all right with that? We understand this priority. Okay, good. Deed restrictions, we're going to talk about later. Deed restrictions are any limitation on use, like covenants, for example. Those are also encumbrances that pass along with the property. So anytime you have restrictions like covenants, they are appurtenant, which means not only do I have to follow those restrictions, who else does? The next owner and the next owner and every subsequent owner after that. Those things are appurtenant, so they stay with the property. Okay? You can get rid of a lead pendants and a writ of attachment. You're not going to be tested on those. Just skip over. Well, obviously, I've never seen the state exam, but what I can tell you is they have increasingly fallen out of the syllabus as far as things to be emphasized. And I haven't had anybody in a long time come and say, I saw a writ of attachment and I didn't understand what it was. So my guess is I'm going to see it again. I can't make it an ironclad guarantee. So if you absolutely want to study it, feel free. Okay? Yes, sir.
You say you've never seen the state exam?
That's exactly right. Well, I did a long time ago when I took it. Yeah.
Re-roll them that thing,
Yeah. They update them all the time. There are 6,000 questions in the test bank for the state exam, and I'm never allowed to see them. So.
But you have clearly, you're clearly versed in the book as well.
I'm versed in their language. I know what they focus on. I know how to read between those lines of, what needs to be focused on. They create syllabus. That's exactly right, and they create test questions too. So, it flows all from them. 4 hours. 140. Y'all seem very preoccupied with slide that test. I don't know why. All right, why don't we do this? This is a good breaking point because when we come back, we're going to talk about easements and what an easement is. We'll continue in chapter 3 here. So let's go ahead and break right here, and we will come back at 10 minutes past 1 and pick up with easements. Okay?
My friends do.